Добрий день.
Good morning. I want to thank everybody who joined us. It's Olga Atamanova, Ukraine Media Center, Ukrinform. We start our operation today. It's year 9 of the war and day 259 of the heroic resistance of the Ukrainian people. And now I want to introduce our speakers. Today we will have Svitlana Vodolaha, Press Secretary of the Directorate of the State Emergency Service in Kyiv, and Oleksandr Khorunzhiy, Press Officer of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. So let's start with the situation in the capital of Ukraine. Ms. Svitlana, what's the situation? We know that the capital is under strikes. If we summarize the consequences of these strikes, and talking about the situation with energy service, how does it influence the work of, so to say, alternative sources of heating? How does it influence the fire safety? Good morning, everybody. Thanks for your questions. I want to greet everybody because it's my first interview without my combat uniform on. I want to remind you that in any case we are ready, we will resist, and everything will be Ukraine. I want to start really with a little bit of statistics. As of today, we cannot say that Kyiv is 100% safe. From the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the rescue personnel had 96 missions related to strikes by the Russians. By the results of those events, we pulled 40 people from under the debris. Unfortunately, the people perished, 136 people injured. I'm saying this figure, that's the number of people rescued and transferred to the medical emergency facilities. The total number is bigger. We rescued 132 people and 538 people evacuated, which means the number of people who could not get evacuated by themselves during the shellings or missile strikes. The emergency service personnel is on duty 24/7. We are ready to go on any mission related to massive strikes, but we hope on our anti-aircraft defense forces, our armed forces, and we want and we wish no more such events to happen, not only in capital but all over the country in general. But now that we're facing, and we keep facing this full-scale invasion, we face another problem, which is fires. So the utility fires, they are of different nature now, and they are all due to Russian aggression. Why? Because the enemy inflicts strikes on the critical infrastructure, and unfortunately people suffer. Due to these, people look for alternative sources of heating, alternative devices to use to cook food and to provide lighting, and unfortunately it causes other kind of problems. Talking about statistics, comparing to previous year, the number of fires decreased, but it's not related to the fact that people became more diligent or started taking care more of their safety. It's related to the fact that specifically in the spring people were leaving their houses, and that's why the number of fires decreased. Well, talking in the language of statistics, from the day one, not from the beginning of the year, so until today, there were 78 missions to put out fire. Is it many or is it not so much? So besides the strikes inflicted by the Russians, 78 means 78 damaged apartments, injured people, damaged lives. And unfortunately, from day one, we have 3 cases when we had explosions of the gas equipment. I mean the touristic gas equipment. Those are the 3 cases which are all identical. When the lights go off, when the power is shut down, people who use electric ovens, they forget to switch them off. They put the gas equipment on top of the electric oven, I mean the portable gas heaters. And as a consequence of that, when the power goes back on, the explosion happens. Unfortunately, all of those 3 events were without injuries, but they caused damage to the apartments. But no one can guarantee that something more powerful, like a more powerful explosion, may happen in future, which may cause injury or, God forbid, death of people. That's why now the attention of the all emergency personnel, both in the capital and outside, is drawn to the information and prophylaxis measures. We call the users to be more careful with the touristic gas devices. We remind them the safety rules and the operation rules, to be more careful with the open fire, I mean the candles, or the self-made lighting devices which use open fire. And obviously with the use, to be more careful with the use of any portable electric devices, because it's a widespread practice when people buy non-certified electric equipment, for example in the markets, and during the overload on the network, when the power goes off and then back on, the short circuit may happen, which may cause fire. The key element is, or like the most terrible part of this, is that the fire may happen when no one is at home and no one can detect it in a timely manner, and no one can report to the emergency service, and we only get report when the fire goes big. So we ask our citizens to be more attentive, to switch off all the electric devices as they leave their homes. If they use any gas equipment or open fire, please make sure that everything is switched off, everything is put out. And obviously, if you're at home and the power goes out, when we're talking about the electric ovens and heating devices, switch all of them off. Ms. Svitlana, thank you very much for this comprehensive monologue, this profound advice. I want to invite Mr. Oleksandr to talk about the situation in Ukraine in general. Mr. Oleksandr, let's start with the last day. We know that Dnipro found itself under fire again. What are the consequences of those strikes? Good morning, everybody. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. The emergency personnel went out on more than 200 missions to mitigate the consequences of the strikes of the Russian Federations. We put out 12 fires and provided psychological help to 67 people. As to Dnipro, in particular, the enemy hit one of the logistic enterprises in Dnipro, which caused big-scale fire with the area of more than 3,000 square meters. Our rescue personnel had to do a big job. Our guys saved 4 people, 4 men, 19, 32, 34, and 45 years. All of them are in the hospital now, and 3 of them are in a difficult condition. We also, on a constant basis, we suffer the shellings in the Nikopol region, and the rescue personnel works there on a permanent basis. 2 communities were shelled by Russians, Marhanets and Mironets. Residential areas damaged in Marhanets. In Myrivska community, 18 residential houses were damaged and 12 utility facilities. And notwithstanding the fact that the enemy keeps bombarding our facilities, our residential areas, we are ready to react. I want to say that about 7,000 rescue personnel are on duty at the moment, and this number can grow depending on the operational situation and depending on the location of the massive bombardments or any emergencies happening. We are ready to reinforce the areas with personnel and material. This is the operational situation. As to the fire and general statistics all over Ukraine, I want to tell you that starting from the beginning of the year, there was 71,761 fires. It's a huge number of fires, which caused the death of 1,162 people. 1,278 people injured. Out of them, 89 below 18 years, and 25 teenagers before the age of 18. If we take the share of the residential areas, is 40% of fires were happening in the residential areas. The share of the fires in industrial facilities increased this year due to the shellings. If previous year the share of the residential areas fire was bigger, this year the share of fires in industrial facilities and agricultural facilities grew this year. However, the residential sector is still 40% out of all the fires, and it's a vast number. Why is it so? It's because I'm talking now without the account of the occupied territories. A small part of the Kharkiv region, Donetsk region, Kherson region. Just imagine the figures there. And now, as to the advice, what do people have to do when the power is shut down? Many people use gas devices, gas ovens, oven fires, and someone is even trying to install the power generators in their apartments, which is strictly prohibited, and some people use candles. Just a small advice about the generators: don't use the generators in your apartment. Why is it apartment? Because they emit toxic products of burning, because the flammable liquids are used for power generation in generators. So we have to understand very clearly not to use generators at home. Now some kind of generators emerged in the market which are electric, but what's their hazard? If you commit a lot of such generators to the grid, it will cause overload, and consequently it will cause the fire. The grid will not hold it. So we have to understand, please don't use the generators. So is it only the option available for private houses? Well, yes, we can use them, but they should not be located closer to the house itself, 6 meters distance, because the toxic products, the gas can get inside the house through the windows or through the doors. And now, as to the gas burners, now people started procuring them in mass, but what's the problem about them? First of all, you have to go for a certified product in the licensed point of sale. Don't buy it from hands from uncertified sellers, because it's fire and explosion hazard. So first of all, read the manual and use the equipment in a strict compliance with the manual provided by the manufacturer. Hide it from the children, never let children use them, and in no case leave them unattended. I mean, these gas burners, it's important. And keep them away from the sunlight and from the influence of high temperatures. Why is it important? Because they can explode. Now, as to the ovens, it's an important topic, because in private residences and in other facilities the oven heating starts to be used, and it's a fire hazard. We have to understand it, and it has certain requirements to it. The oven should not have any flaws, any damage. You have to put a metal tray under the oven so the sparkles or other burning products don't get on the floor. Don't leave the ovens unattended. And when you throw logs in it, they should not protrude out of the furnace itself. This is the short advice for the people, and obviously you have to clean the chimney to remove the cinder and other products of burning there. And as to the candles, everything is simple. People have to install the candles on a hard surface. They shouldn't be long, they should be short. You don't have to burn it to the nail. Leave at least like 5 centimeters of it, and obviously don't leave it unattended. It's important, and obviously don't let the children use open fire. This is the short advice, but they may keep your dwelling from fire. If talking about the last period, last weeks, when it becomes colder in the streets, we understand that people, specifically now, started looking for alternative heating sources. What are the most spread cases that were happening in Ukraine? Ms. Svitlana mentioned it, and she mentioned that the cases that may happen to the devices for heating the food. Maybe there is different dynamics in general over Ukraine. Look, in Ukraine the dynamic is pretty much the same. The main reason for fire is the uncareful handling of fire, which causes the mass part of the fires and overload of the on the power grid, which causes short circuits. Those are the main causes of fire. So uncareful handling, I mean using of furnace equipment and open fire, or other cases like that, but all of them are mostly due to the neglect of the people, neglect of the fire safety rules, elementary rules. Now that there are many talks, do you need to pull the equipment out of the socket when you leave home, or can you leave them there? Yeah, it should be done on a mandatory basis. Why? Because there are shifts of power, there are shifts of voltage, and obviously we have to comply with these requirements to pull the equipment out of the power sockets, because it may cause short circuit in the devices connected to the sockets. Mr. Oleksandr, I can't help asking you about the situation in the deoccupied parts of Ukraine currently. What's the area that was demined, and how many hazardous objects were found there? As to the work of our pyrotechnics, from the beginning of the war we heard 264 devices defused, including 2,640 defused with a large number of aviation bombs out of them. And we cleared about 76,000 hectares of Ukrainian territory cleared out of explosive devices. The situation is more difficult in Kharkiv region because the enemy soothed the territory with all those explosive devices, including anti-infantry mines and anti-tank mines, and they're frequently used in residential areas, under the gas pipes, under electric lines, and the positions where Russian troops were located. And in fact, every day people get injured or even perish in those territories. So we ask the people to comply with the three main requirements. If you see an explosive device, don't come close, don't touch it. Call 101. You can use the demining application on your phone and submit an application in there. Don't go for mushrooms to the forest. Don't go in the fields, because the enemy was mining the territory in whole, and people just walk to pick some mushrooms and they lose their lives. So please listen to us and think about your safety. Thank you, dear colleagues. Your questions. Please, microphone, please introduce yourself. Vitaly Kolet, Ukrinform. I have a question to both speakers. Maybe now that Mr. Oleksandr is by the microphone, you said that there were 4 people rescued in Dnipro. Are you talking about the same location or different locations? Yeah, it's about the logistic installation which suffered damage. We suffered bombardment, and due to the bombardment, there were 4 people injured. Thank you. And Ms. Svitlana, the Kyiv authorities stated that with the beginning of the heating season, the load on the electric grid will decrease. Do you expect the decrease in number of fires and explosions of the gas balloons? Unfortunately, we don't expect this number of cases to decrease. As I mentioned, the number of fires decreased, but it's not due to the fact that people became more careful, but it's about the number, it's due to the number of people who stay in the capital. In general, now we only can testify the fact that the fires are mostly related to short circuits or overload, the voltage shifts in the grid. And yesterday there was fire, maybe you've seen it or maybe you've heard about it, in the left bank, in the Levoberezhny station in the market. And one of the reasons is electrotechnical emergency. So it was probably caused by the voltage shift during the power shutdown, because the connection of all the points of sale doesn't always comply with the standards. So we don't expect the number of the fires to decrease specifically due to this reason. And we can forecast the number of the cases related to the application of gas equipment or alternative sources of either heating or alternative devices for cooking. Any more questions, friends? We don't have any more questions. I want to thank you for joining us. Dear colleagues, I will remind you our next briefing is at 13 o'clock. We will have Sergei Khlan joining us, the deputy of Kherson Regional Council, and we'll talk about the situation in Kherson. Bear with us. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.
Дякую. Right, thanks for watching.